of reminder, same format as the prior panel, 2 minutes to introduce, 3 minutes per question, and then 2 minutes to conclude. We will be doing it a little bit different. We have 3 questions and 6 candidates. So we'll be starting again, going left to right, but skipping every other one for the questions, going right to left for introductions, and then again, going left to right for introductions, and then again, right to left. I'll figure it out. But with that, let us get to our introductions, and I'd like to start with Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Jim. Good evening, everybody. Sorry, guys, I'm getting over a flu. Good evening, everybody. My name is Eric Jimenez. For those of you guys who are keeping track, this is my 3rd time running for City Council. Don't hold it against me. I just see it as I just haven't won yet. I've been a lifelong resident of Rancho, Cucamonga, over 30 years, 36 now, so I think that makes me a lifelong resident of this city. About 8 years ago, I met a beautiful woman, so I decided to settle down and start a family. A couple years down the line, we bought our first home here in Rancho, Cucamonga, and about 19 months ago, I became a father. So the biggest title that I now hold and the proudest is being of dad. I'm running again, like I did in 2010 and 2012 for the same reasons. I think there's room in a council of 5 for a different voice. I think a lot of the young working families in this community don't really get their voices heard a lot of times. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running. I think I can bring a different perspective to the city council and just bring a different energy and tackle the problems that we have in the city, not for immediate solutions, but look into the long-term solutions for the problems that we have in the city at hand right now. Thank you.
Mr. Hanlon.
Hi, I'm Bill Hanlon, and thank you all for coming. And before I forget, I need to take a picture of you all. Okay, everybody smile. Thank you. My wife wouldn't believe me if I told him. Like I said, I'm Bill Hanlon. I'm a husband to an angel. I've got a brilliant daughter. I'm a Vietnam vet. I'm a businessman, and most of all, a community volunteer. I've received proclamations from the federal agency, Rancho Cucamonga, 2 from the county, and 1 from our state senator for my work with veterans and with senior citizens. I work with museums in our city for 30 years, and I've also worked at a paleontology museum for 13 years, giving tours to little kids. I'm instrumental in getting the banner program changed and starting Freedom Courtyard. As a businessman, I've worked closely with major corporations including Honda, Amgen, and Bergen-Brunswick. What I bring to the table is determination to put a cap on our out-of-control salaries and keep within the budget so that our children would not have a city that's gone broke. I'll work within the framework of a team, but as an individual representing the voters and not a yes man. And again, thank you all for the picture.
Mr. Alexander.
Good evening. I'm glad that we have built up a little bit of crowd here, and it's good tonight to see everybody. For those of you that don't know, my name's Bill Alexander. I've served the city quite a long period of time in a position of representation. Started out as a representative of the fire board many years ago, ultimately the city council, and then for 12 years as mayor. I was retired by the voters in 2006, but I came back in 2010. I've served the last 4 years on the city council. Probably in my particular capacity, what I offer more than anything is personal contact and always the ability to follow up with the community, because in the pecking order we have, the reality is you're the boss. And from there, it flows downhill, who's responsible to whom. It's tough to explain all these things in 1 minute, but I've enjoyed my time back on the city council tremendously. I've enjoyed the representation and getting out and seeing the public. I'm a little more blue collar than some, but I wear that as a badge of honor. We're having an economic condition right now in the United States where it's difficult for a lot of people to get by. And I think any representation has to reflect a really concern for those people less fortunate than some of the rest of us. So we thank you for being here and look forward to the rest of the evening.
Mrs. Williams.
Hi. I also want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I wish the crowd was a little bigger, actually, with all these extra chairs, but hoping you'll all go home and tell your friends. So, I'm Diane Williams, and I'm honored to have served on the council since 1990. And I've seen some amazing changes in our beautiful city in that time. I can honestly say I was lucky enough to have been part of most of those changes, and I take great pride in the city that we've become. So we're a city where families come to raise their children, and then they stay on through retirement. So that to me says a lot about the quality of our city. My original reason for running for city council was to advocate for the city to pull out of the San Bernardino County library system and start our own city library services. We did this in Rancho Cucamonga fashion last year. We did so well through our great staff that we won the National Medal of Honor for museums and libraries. So it took a while, but what we did was the right thing to do. A lot was said tonight about passions. I have a lot of varied passions. As the library opened, my husband and I created the Friends of the Library bookstore, and looking now at what it has become is a source of huge pride. I became passionate about the Pacific Electric Trail. There's also the freeway, which, by the way, wasn't here. Can you imagine? No freeway? It may be a little quieter, but would certainly be less efficient. I've also been privileged to be part of the Metrolink, and the list goes on. I've been active in marketing the city to employers to bring jobs and different kinds of businesses here. We work with developers to bring different varied housing so that everyone can have a house they can afford. Also, during the rough times, we were very intense on being part of it, having teams to go out to cities and to businesses that were having trouble, and we created these business retention teams. And I'm very proud of those because we were successful, and one thing that the city has done, I think, very well is reach out to their small businesses.
Dr. Kennedy.
Welcome, everyone. Time is a very valuable commodity, and I thank you for being here and investing some time with us this evening. I've been married for 37 years to a wonderful man by the name of Michael. We've lived in Rancho Cucamonga for 34 years. This is my home. This is my community. And what I will bring to the council when elected is, first of all, strong faith, Christian values. There are times where we're going to make decisions. Some are going to be very easy. Others will be more difficult. And I will need to seek wisdom and counsel in making those decisions. The second thing is a strong business advocacy. I support new businesses, existing businesses, the opportunity to look for new, unique businesses that will bring a highly skilled workforce and families that can afford to live and work in our city. My husband comes from a long line of business owners since 1960. He's currently a business owner. He's a senior partner in Estelle and Kennedy law firm. And finally, proven leadership that I will bring. 36 years in education, leadership as a teacher, writing curriculum for students throughout the district, leadership as a principal. I was principal of Rancho Cucamonga Middle School, changing that culture and building leadership capacity among teachers, and finally as a superintendent, overseeing thousands of employees, millions of dollars in budget, and making sure that that proven leadership will be used effectively to bring about a better, stronger community in Rancho.
Mr. Munoz.
Good evening. Fellow residents, my name is Vic Munoz, and I'm running and asking for your vote on November the 4th. As for myself, I'll swing no bull, if you've seen some of my campaign signs. I'm a native Californian. I was born in East Los Angeles. I shined shoes and sold newspapers on the corner of Whittier and Lorena. And as a young boy, I learned what the value of a buck meant. I have lived in Rancho Cucamonga for 24 years. My whole family grew up here, and I brought up my children here. They've all went to school at the schools here. I graduated in '63 from St. John Bosco in Bellflower, and in 73 from Cal State Los Angeles, earning degrees in social sciences and also in international development. In 1965, I joined the United States Marine Corps, and I served until 1978. I also served with the Air Wing, I served with artillery, and I served with recon. Since 1973, I've spent the majority of my 40-year career in the geotechnical and heavy industrial construction fields, plus public service and also in education. My work involved the siting of nuclear generating facilities, building refineries, petrochemical plants, and mining plants as well. And I've also matriculated in the field of safety and health and in the environmental disciplines. Most importantly, during my career, I was involved in estimating, budgeting, cost control, and scheduling of major multi-million-dollar projects. As Deputy Chief of Cal OSHA, responsible for all enforcement activities, I turned into Governor Duke Mason the entire budget for the Department of Industrial Relations, which included all labor departments. So I'm no novice to budgeting, and I have also currently licensed in the field of engineering, construction. I am board certified by the American Board of Industrial Hygiene, the Board of Certified Safety Professionals. I have teaching credentials in the field of safety and health and also in the environment. I guess that's it.
Our first question, we will start with Mr. Jimenez. Sir, can the City Council effectively negotiate a fair and arm's-length contract with the public employee unions, considering that these unions have been among the largest contributors to City Council and mayoral candidates?
Well, the short answer to that is no. But let me start by saying this. I am a proud Democrat. I believe in the workers having the right to unionize and to organize. I believe that workers have the right to collective bargain for their pay and for their benefits, and also that workers have a right to a pension so they can retire with dignity. Because let's face it, Social Security by itself is never going to cut it. But having said that, basically what we're talking about are public safety unions. We're talking about fire and county sheriffs. At one point in the life of these unions, they decided that they wanted to be more than just advocates for their workers, but they decided they wanted to be political players in our local political system. So they have contributed heavily to a lot of candidates. They have contributed heavily to a lot of candidates for city council and mayor and also the county. Can you say that they can sit down and negotiate in good faith with the city council? I would like to think so, but I'm also not naive enough to believe that that's going to happen. And there's a way around this. It's not just bringing this up every 2 years when there's an election cycle. We can change this and limit the effect that certain unions have and developers and other special interests have in our city by putting campaign limits. If you limit the amount people get from a certain group, you will limit their political influence. Thank you.
Mr. Hanlon, would you like me to repeat the question, or?
No, thank you.
Mr. Hanlon?
The word fair befuddles me a lot. What is fair to one might not be fair to another. The facts of history have already addressed this subject. If the member of the city council benefit from negotiations, then it would be logical to say no, and it wouldn't be fair. The case in point is the firemen's union, who contributes large sums of money to each election, and they wish a raise, and it affects the retirement of the city council members. Then the council members get a raise, as they have every year, in good times and bad. We end up with 22 fire chiefs and only 7 firehouses. Is this fair? But at the same time, if those who formed a union out of fear of the top-heavy management and have not gotten raises for 4+ years, then the city council can certainly hold them at arm's length. Again, the facts of history have already spoken to this subject. Is this fair? Thank you.
Mr. Alexander?
Wow, I tend to agree with a little bit and disagree with some also. You know, the question being, can the largest contributors to the council mayoral candidates, can we separate ourselves from any contributions in making decisions? Well, let me tell you, if we can't, we don't deserve to be on a city council. It's really not sometimes the employee's fault that they receive wages and benefits that are excessive. It's people who vote. And I don't mind telling you, when this came up during the last budget session, I voted no. It still came up and passed, but I voted no. And you know what? I didn't get a lot of criticism from people that were organized in unions. Actually, the reality is some of them understand that wages have gone sky high, and there was a degree of respect. We have to learn to say no. We're the governing body representing you. The tail doesn't wag the dog. And the buck stops right here. But I want to go a little bit further. I hope you don't mind. You can stop me if you want. This whole issue of money in the city goes much farther than public safety. There are several positions that receive excessively high pay and benefits, and that really needs to be curtailed. There's no doubt about that. But I'm going to tell you right now, we've got a lot of people that are sitting at the top of this particular organization who have all the benefits, that have all the access to a job that has security beyond most people in the private sector, and yet we're paying out $250,000, $275,000, $300,000, $325,000, and more in compensation and benefits, and that's wrong. We can't continue to do that. There's going to be a reason sometimes why public safety is expensive, particularly at the worker level, because quite honestly, overtime is demanded and you can't hire extra employees. It's not cost effective. Sometimes overtime is just necessary. But what we have forgotten is the biggest part of what is going to bring this community back, and that's the worker bees that are being relegated to the bottom, volunteers that are being relegated to the bottom. We've taken away a lot of the benefits from people who receive little or no compensation and who work part-time, and what do? We reduce them even more, and that is wrong. The city owes something to the workers of this community, and we're going to have to curtail a lot of the effective pay raises to the very highest, and that's coming soon. Thank you.
Mrs. Williams?
First of all, City Council does not negotiate with labor organizations. That's done with a negotiator. And yes, they are given parameters to work within. The City Council does set the budget and does look at how much we feel we can or cannot, use for employees. We are, by the way, one of the few cities that is totally funded for our pensions. We have no unfunded pensions. We all new employees pay their own pensions. We've changed the structure of excuse me. We've changed the structure of how people pay for their pensions and their medical care. I know that we've taken great pains to be fair and equitable in the city's employees. I believe we have the greatest staff of any city. Our city staff are to be commended for their efforts during this past bad recession to sit back, and yes, they did. Some of them didn't get raises for several years. By the way, neither did the administration. The administration did not as well. Anyway, they set back. They took tougher jobs as maybe a job next to them was eliminated, as someone left, it was not refilled, so they worked harder. Now times are coming back. We're getting on our economic feet again, and I think it's only fair that we reward these employees with better pay and when we can, and so they are starting to get raises again, and I hope we can continue it in the future.
Dr. Kennedy.
First of all, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the men and women who serve and protect this community. We all benefit from their hard work and dedication. I believe that our safety and fire departments are models throughout Southern California. That being said, yes, absolutely, I can negotiate at arm's length with the unions. The reason why I know I can do this is my experience and training as a chief negotiator and my understanding of negotiations and contracts, and more importantly, because these people are professionals. They want what we want. They want to attract the best and brightest workforce. They want to be competitive, to retain a quality, highly skilled workforce. And they want a solvent, fiscally sound budget. No one benefits from bankruptcy. So we all want that. And I think by working together, responsibly and collaboratively, we can make decisions in the best interest of this city without being influenced.
Mr. Munoz.
In answer to your question, no, not with the present makeup of the city council. I believe that the well-being of the city may find itself on the brink of bankruptcy or facing major reductions in services, if not in the too distant future. The only way to turn this abysmal future around is to elect individuals who are not afraid of making decisions, budgetary and policy decisions that are not status quo. Going along with special interests to get along just won't get it. New fiscal policies, controls have to be introduced and then enacted in such a way to affect what we as elected officials need to remember. The will and needs of the residents and the businesses in this fine community come first and foremost. Good elected officials cannot be afraid of asking questions on issues that are brought to them by their constituency. If we cannot serve for the benefit of all the residents of Rancho Cucamonga, then we have no business being on the city council. As far as the city council is concerned, it has to be unburdened by special interests, and that is what I've found. Currently, you have 5 bargaining units within the city. Those bargaining units consist of San Bernardino Public Employees Association for non-supervisory and public employees, Rancho Cucamonga Employees Association for the general supervisory and professional and mid-management employees, and then you have the firefighters, 108 employees, where millions of dollars are expended in city funds. You have the Fire Support Services Association, which takes care of non-management and non-safety fire district employees. You have the Rancho Cucamonga Firefighters Local, number 2274, which handles non-management and safety employees. And then last, you have the Fire Management Employee Group Management Employees, which handles safety and non-safety. The current city council and management continue to give the firefighters everything they ask for and don't require justification for expenditures. Management is simply not qualified to handle the major labor problem. An example is the salaries that I have here. And I'll show it to you, folks. Millions of dollars in expenditures. They're highlighted in yellow. The overtime expenditures for battalion chiefs and chiefs almost is double their base salaries. That's unconscionable, folks. We can't let that continue on. In addition, I have here also a thing for a purchase order for a new ladder truck. No justification was made for that ladder truck, and we spent over $1 million for it. What happened to the old ladder truck? What was wrong with the old ladder truck? There was nothing wrong with the old ladder truck, other than they quoted some NFPA regulation to justify its purchase. And nobody within the city council or management questioned it. I'm saying you've got to have some budgetary compliance here. You've got to have somebody overseeing their activities. And that's about where I'll leave it at that for now.
Just a very slight format change. It seems foolish to ask all 6 of you about repeating the question. So I'll state the question for the first candidate and the 4th candidate, and of course, if anywhere in between you'd like me to do that, we'll do it at that point. For the 4th candidate, primarily for the audience who doesn't have the benefit of having all the questions written down in front of them like everybody else up here. So with that, our next question, we will start with Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander, are there any city services that you believed could be outsourced to private entities to achieve better results or cost savings?
Interestingly enough, we actually already outsource, for those of you that aren't aware of it. I know that certain individuals may have problems with it, but we actually outsource for the collection of waste management in the community. There are other cities that don't, that are paying up to twice as much for the same surface. We outsource landscaping and maintenance, street districts and maintenance for our streets. The ambulance service we have, which other communities may have their own municipal ambulance services, we contract for. They do an excellent job. And whether you consider it or not, our police force, in many ways, is outsourced because we contract with the County of San Bernardino. And I might add, they are doing a very, very good job, and they're saving us money, too. We have different types of hazardous materials abatement and disposal with the County of San Bernardino. That has to be considered somewhat outsourcing. Mutual aid agreements, which are held with emergency services, are another form of outsourcing that the fire service has entered into and does save the city money. However, there's personal pride in people that work for this community. And there's a lot of good people, and I'm talking about the worker bees in this community, that take a tremendous amount of pride in caring for the community. Many times, much more so than simply a person who's contracted and has no vested interest in what this community looked like. There's a lot of people that actually live here and work here. Their kids go to school here, and they want to see this city the finest city around. I don't think I would really try to get over outsourced, to be quite honest with you. It so happens that in most cases, in outsourcing, we always relegate that, unfortunately, to the lowest paid jobs and not the highest paid jobs. I don't want to see that continue. I want to see those people in our community right now that are working for us have a place like they feel like stay, work in the community, take pride in the community, and hopefully retire here.
Mrs. Williams.
Rancho Cucamonga is what's known as a contract city, meaning we contract out for many services. The mayor mentioned a list of them, so I won't repeat it. The mayor, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Boy, am I going back in history.
Yeah, I know.
Sorry. Mr. Alexander mentioned several of them. And one he didn't mention, which I think is one of the really cool contracts, is a situation where we contract with the West End Vector Control. It's a district situation, but they handle all of our vector issues. And as you know, some of you live in a certain area, vector issues can be a big deal. And many cities pay into this. It's like a JPA, so they handle all that. Again, we don't have to have people trained in that. We don't have to supply the pesticides and all that stuff. So that's the value of having a contract. We're always looking at services that might be contracted out, and we have to compare the cost of how it's being handled by city employees. We have amazing employees, and if we were to contract for a service, it would have to be shown that it could be done with the same quality that we're getting for less money. And again, our employees are so good that most of them, it's way above and beyond what the money, I think, what the money is paying for. So we have not changed many of the contracts recently. But when a contract comes up for renewal, that comparison's made again to see if that's the best way to go. It may be that at this time, whatever the contract may be, that at this time the city is better off to provide the services. But the big major services, when the city was incorporated, those were brought in because the city was not in any way, shape, or form prepared to handle those kinds of things, such as waste removal and vector control and our sheriffs being a contract for us, which I agree they've done a wonderful job, and I would never, ever think that we could do a better job than the sheriffs have done for us. So, yeah, we're a contract city, and we're always aware that there might be a better contract out there, but we take great care to make sure it's looked at very carefully.
Dr. Kennedy.
Would you like to repeat the question for the audience?
The question is, are there any city services that you believe could be outsourced to private entities to achieve better results or cost savings?
Without going through the list of current contracts that are outsourced, I will tell you what criteria I used when determining as a superintendent whether or not I'd be outsourcing any particular service. First of all, I looked at cost savings, of course. The second, that was alluded to by Mrs. Williams and Mr. Alexander, is quality control and oversight. If it costs more man hours to ensure that those services or that product is of high quality than we're actually paying, then it no longer is cost effective. So you need to look at cost and efficacy as well as quality of the service that's being outsourced. And the third component is to make sure that it does not impact or fall under the purview of existing labor contracts. So a perfect example of what we have that has been mentioned in terms of outsourcing is our sheriff's department and our trash industry and pickup. Those are all well done, cost effective, and with high quality, and are under or within the scope of city rights and management.
Mr. Munoz.
Folks, this is a subject that I have actually taught to Middle Eastern professors and also those in Latin America. The subject is GIS, Geographic Information Systems. We spend over $500,000 a year that could be outsourced at a fraction of its cost to private industry. We could reduce our financial burden of payroll, taxes, and overtime and pensions. All we would need is a minimal staff to handle changes and modifications on GIS. Currently performed by many cities and public entities. I mentioned to you the city of Santa Monica has outsourced GIS. Inland Empire Utility Agency has also done the same thing, as well as the Orange County Sanitation District. These folks all estimated and made their estimates, and they turned it over to private industry. Numerous small engineering firms can handle the Rancho Cucamonga's GIS needs and requirements without any problem. Example, GIS training over the last couple of months measured $24,000 to send the people to a training program that wasn't necessary. They put them up in the Hilton Hotel in San Bernardino for that $24,000. That's wasteful expenditures of money. So somebody's not looking after the house, you know. In other words, if we continue spending like this, we're going to put ourselves in a bankruptcy situation. So here's GIS that we can outsource at a fraction of the cost. Next, I would take on our fire departments, or our fire department and the unions. We've come to the point where we have to deal with this on a very strong basis. We have to sit up and pay attention, make some hard decisions. I would transfer the fire departments over to the county of San Bernardino. This would eliminate the payroll, taxes, insurance, pensions programs, and keep us from going into bankruptcy in the near future. Because this is what's happening. This overtime that we're spending is a game that's being played out, and the city is being built. We got to stop it. We got to initiate new policies and procedures if we're going to retain the fire departments, or we ship them off to the county of San Bernardino, where they can still do the same job, and they can't say they won't do the job because they know what's got to be done here in the city. They've got their plans and their policies as far as services for the city and emergency services. So that's what I would do with them. Last, I would take on the cable TV industry services, conduct a review of current supplier services and rates, issue RFPs based upon clear and understandable bid specifications, refuge collections for the year 2000 and 2015, issue clear and defined bid specifications with special terms and conditions. This thing with Burtec is nothing but sweetheart contract, folks. Review current insurance brokerage rates and issue RFP for services as well. Thank you.
Mr. Jimenez.
So Mr. B. Alexander already went through the list of the stuff we outsource. But just so you guys know my philosophy behind outsourcing, I'm not a big believer of it. The whole idea of taking a service that is provided by a dedicated city employee or employees and giving it to a for-profit entity who's a contractor for the city, who's really, they're a business, so their bottom line is to make money. So they're going to find ways to cut the cost. So what they're going to end up doing is reducing service and reducing wages for the workers that work for that entity. So at the end, all of us lose, because if we outsource certain services, we're not going to get the same quality of services, and that company is going to find ways to pay the workers less, which means the workers in our community are going to have less disposable income to invest in our community and provide for their families. That's it.
Mr. Hanlon.
Outsourcing of the service workers was brought up more than once. And they went union because they're terrified of the management stepping on them. And they were terrified of losing their jobs, and some of them have been working here for 20, 30 years. I don't see that as a positive thing. We're going through some tough times. Tough times call for tough decisions, not waste. And I believe what Mr. Jimenez said was true. We are currently drowning in top management salaries, retirement pay, and the cycle shows no end. It's not going to stop, and the only way it's going to stop is when the newspapers tell us we're like Bell, California. Thus, the decision is to contract out the city manager, the assistant city manager, and the 2 deputy city managers to start. Cut their salary by 2/3, all benefits, everything, they get 2/3, and we'll have 1,000 people apply for those jobs. Next, we go toward the upper management, who, by the way, are averaging $204,000 a year that we're paying out. How much of you, and by the way, that adds up to more than 90% salary plus benefits. It's ridiculous. This alone would have a huge effect on our payroll. It would have a huge effect on our benefits package, our liabilities. It would have a tremendous effect on the morale, because these people, and believe me, I've been to companies where they've outsourced, real companies, not a city. And let me tell you, these people come in to work to help show profit and to earn the money. Thank you.
The next question will begin with Dr. Kennedy. Dr. Kennedy, what changes to the city municipal code would you pursue and why?
Codes and policies are meant to be fluid and living documents that change according to the demographics and the needs of an organization. And so I would begin by looking at those that address our businesses and whether or not they are business-centered, business-friendly, and encourage new businesses and prevent barriers for opening or fees that would be barriers to any new businesses coming into our city. So I would look at those and I would seek the input from the chamber as well as businesses and be responsive to that input and that feedback and make changes accordingly.
Mr. Munoz.
Yes, sir. Changes I would make to both to the code as well as to policy and procedures. First of all, I would require that the misdemeanor code prosecution cases be reviewed by the city attorney and voted upon by the city council. The emphasis is on use of community services in order to be, I think, more sensitive to the needs of our people. Seeing a photograph of a disabled veteran trying to mow his lawn that he cannot do is something that he shouldn't be prosecuted for. That I would champion. Review of code enforcement policies and meeting with cited constituents to discuss the issues. That's sensitivity. Revised Rancho Cucamonga City Council budget review process. And I want to show you right here that the budget review process begins right here. But that's where the Rancho Cucamonga City Council should be involved in. Not down here as a rubber stamp, because that's where they get the budget and end up approving it. So, the flow chart and the council at estimate inception, not to be the rubber stamp at the very end. And I would repeal the following. Resolution 14-076, adopting a charge to review candidate statements. I think it's discriminatory, it's burdensome, and it's akin to the Old South, Old Crow type policies. They're going to champion that. They said, well, we have the authority under the code, under the elections code. They have the authority, but you don't have to carry that through. And that's how I saw this discriminatory statement. I saw it as just nothing but Old Crow, Jim Crow. Common sense should have signaled the city council what it represented, and this was represented by the city attorney as well. Resolution 14179, city clerk's estimate, and refuge and recycling estimate should be repealed. Sweetheart contracts and improper city administrative support for private industries must end. Order a review of unbudgeted city reserves to be paid back to the taxpayers. You are the people that I want to represent, the taxpayers. And that's my final objective. I figure if I can sit on the council a couple of years, a couple of terms, I'll get that accomplished. Thank you.
Mr. Jimenez.
Well, there's a couple minor things that I would like to change, and then I'll go into the bigger picture that I want to change. For those of you guys who don't know, we currently have a parking fee down at the Metrolink station. We are the only city in the whole San Bernardino County that has a parking fee for people that want to catch the train. We should be promoting public transportation. It's not just about what's practical, but it's also about our future. We need to start moving into more environmental sounds of getting environmentally sound ways to get around. And by having an extra fee on public transportation, you're not really encouraging folks on moving that direction. So that would be the first one. The second one, we are very harsh on the business community when it comes to signage. We really enforce the code when it comes to people putting signage out on the street, but then all of a sudden, every 2 years when we have elections, it's a free-for-all. It's okay to place any corner with all kinds of campaign signs, and let's face it, it looks really ugly. I would actually limit the size of the signs, limit the size of the signs, and also limit the amount you can put out, and maybe just ban them from public cross streets altogether. The bigger picture is we need some type of municipal election code reform. We really need to look at our elections. We need to consider district representation in our city. We are made up of 3 distinct communities, Etowanda, Altaloma, and the Old Cucamonga. I think we would get a broader representation in our city council if we had districts. It's something that we should be considering. Something I mentioned earlier, campaign contribution. We need to limit the amount people give to our candidates so that we don't have just a small group of people dictating what happens in our city. And we also should be considering term limits. I think there's a lot of people in our community, myself, who are trying to just bring our ideas and contribute to our community, and it's just impossible. Because let's face it, if you look at Congress, if you look at state houses, if you look at local politics, the power of incumbency is really powerful. It is hard to get rid of incumbents. So if we're serious about changing our city council and moving forward in our community and building a community that my daughter is going to feel proud of, 20, 30 years from now, we need to change the way we do our local elections. Thank you.
For the benefit of our audience, the current question is, what changes to the city municipal code would you pursue and why? Mr. Hanlon.
Thank you. Well, we have a number of them that we call silly and ridiculous. Let me go over one. We have a municipal code that has signs up on bus stops for non-smoking. And at the day they were put in, the mayor at the time said, we're not going to enforce it, and that's in the newspaper. Why have something that silly? We have Municipal Code 849 and 851, which limits the amount of people who can protest as their right under the First Amendment. Why? Because somebody doesn't want them there. It's not going to work. And even at the council meetings, people got up, and not people from our city, but people got up from all around San Bernardino and said, hey, this is not a good idea. It should not be in. The city should not face civil matters if it comes to that and stand behind bad decisions. Both of those were bad decisions. And I have to agree, we have council members at large. That means nobody's responsible to you, the voter. They're responsible to anybody, and they can always say, it was his fault. No offense, Bill. But that's how it works. If we have districts, then somebody can stand up and say, this is not fair to my district. L&D 2 has a problem. They gave money a year ago. After 2 elections, after 2 votes, they gave money. Nothing's been done with it. We went to a meeting, and we were told, well, if we need more, we'll just go out and get more. We were shown designs and no presentation. Had we had a member on the council who was a stand-up and said, this is your district, you better start standing up, then I'm sure that we would have had better representation of the voters. And you guys have to step up and say, we have to stop this at-large good old boys club. Thank you.
Mr. Alexander.
Well, you know, this has received a lot of really good comments, and probably a lot of them are pretty accurate. For those of you who don't know, the municipal code's over 900 pages long, so good luck in trying to figure the darn thing out. It's very, very difficult. Unfortunately, its effect, I think, is minimal on some and maximum on others. Although it's difficult to decipher, keep in mind that those individuals in the community who have to comply with the municipal code are the everyday paying citizen. And the one that usually, it's the businessman who is faced with knowing every single one of these codes, and even worse, when someone comes down and tells you you have violated it, and this has been addressed before, we wind up being punitive as opposed to understanding and trying to help people in the community. Too many times, too many folks have gone through a very difficult time, some being threatened to lose their house in some case if they don't comply, some being told they'd be arrested for an infraction, not even a misdemeanor. It becomes somewhat intolerable. And I think that's sad. And if it only happens once, it's too many times. But it's happened numerous times. It does need review. And though they're not saying it all the time, I've had members of the business community come to me. We keep priding ourselves in being business friendly. I understand we should be business friendly. And openly, many businesses say we are friendly. Privately, many have a reluctant voice in saying, I'm having a difficult time in getting through City Hall. I'm having a difficult time with the inspection process. I'm having a difficult time in meeting certain deadlines. I want some understanding, and that's a fair request. It's a very fair request. We have to be a little bit more understanding in these economic times of the difficulties people are going through. And I don't care if it's a businessman going through a difficulty or someone having a difficult time keeping his lawn green. This community has to look at the times we're in right now. And a 900-page document sometimes doesn't mean a whole lot if you're having to move out of your home.
Mrs. Williams.
Well, the municipal code is indeed a living document. It's not, it never stands still. In our city, it's looked at, I think it's almost by law. It's looked at, it's different portions are looked at almost every 6 months, and things are addressed that are obsolete through the state, changing their codes or whatever. Keep in mind, many of our codes are dictated by the state, by the master, whatever it is. Anyway, dictated by the state. But anyway, the codes are looked at for clarification. They're tweaked a little bit sometimes. The main thing that can be done, I think, is if someone has identified an area that is really difficult to deal with, is really causing their business a lot of difficulty, or in general. And by the way, 10 years ago, as late as that, We did have a lot of complaints about how difficult it was to work through the city. Businesses, developers were complaining about the strict, stringent codes we had. And once their business was open and up, they came and said, you know, my business is doing better here than it's done in any other city, partly because we maintain the quality. And I'm not going to take any, I'm not embarrassed for that at all. That's what Rancho Cucamonga has established. If we let all those codes go, we may as well go south of the border and live down there, because that's what Rancho Cucamonga is about, making sure that you know what's expected. And we've implemented lots of new software so businesses have a much easier time. You know, you can sit in your jammies and your fuzzy slippers and apply for your permits. We've tried to make it as easy to do all that. Anyway, and should anyone identify a situation that's really a problem, bring it to us. We'll sit down, we'll set up some staff people, we'll go through it. Sometimes it's a misinterpretation of the code. So right now, I don't know of any code that I think is punitive. Again, sometimes it's interpretation, sometimes it's not the code at all. It's a whole nother subject.
Now will come time for the concluding remarks. Concluding remarks will run from the right to the left, so we'll be starting with Mr. Munoz.
I have learned how to follow, and I know how to lead, and make tough decisions without leaving a wake in my path. I've had some major accomplishments in my career. One was passage to the U.S. Congress of major legislation dealing with the amendments to the Mine Safety and Health Act of 1982. That work resulted in the savings of approximately 150,000 jobs across the United States and at least 6,000 jobs here in the state of California. And that was supported by the building and construction trades of the AFL-CIO. I came to work for the Governor Duke Basin with the entire backing of the AFL-CIO as a result of my activities in legislation like this. I also prosecuted those in the entertainment industry after the Twilight Zone tragedy. So I made some tough decisions in my day. But my greatest achievement, I thought, was being the chief opponent on the LMD2 tax rate increase. Many of those here have seen that I can be very tough on people who treat others with little regard to their concerns. I have no regard for those who ignore the vote of the people, which is the basis of our democracy, which continues to protect with sacrifice those who have probably served our country, and especially those who have paid the ultimate price. I'm a Jeffersonian politician. I say stick with Vic. On November 4th, I won't let you down. I have no special interest controlling me, and I am accountable only to you, the taxpayer. I'll get results if you elect me into office. My candidate is supported, and I am endorsed by the former mayor and current city councilman from the city of 29 Palms, the 5-term mayor from the city of La Mirada, Mr. Dave Peters, and also a former city manager, Mr. Adolfo Retta from the city of Monterey Park. Thank you, folks. Appreciate your support.
Dr. Kennedy.
Leadership matters. There's a book that's titled The 21 Laws of Leadership, and the very first chapter addresses the law of the lid. It explains that an organization, a city, a school, a district, a business, a city will never ever rise above the highest level of leadership. If your leadership is a 7, then your city will be a 6. Therefore, you must be intentional about the leaders you select. You cannot leave it to status quo or chance. You can't stay the same and grow. You can't have what you've always had and be forward thinking. I will bring you leadership for the future. I will bring new ideas, proven leadership and experience, a skill set that will take the city to the next level. You don't have to be sick to get better, but you do have to know better to do better. And I will bring the knowledge and the skill set for this community, for our families, to build a stronger, better Rancho. Thank you.
Mrs. Williams.
First, I'm going to make a couple of clarifications. Our city's GIS department actually does contract. We contract to other cities and other entities and other agencies. They come to us, they pay us to do the work for them. So we're very proud of that accomplishment with our skilled workforce doing that. It's quite an accomplishment. Also, our library has done the same thing. They have created play and learn islands that they're selling at $10,000 a pop. Every time they go to a conference, they sell some more of these. So we're doing a little bit of enterprising out there for ourselves. Also, we have never had an unbalanced budget in Rancho Cucamonga, and we never will, certainly as long as I'm on the council. We have been very stringent with our reserves. We do not spend one-time money on ongoing operations. We're always been very careful. And also, we never start a project unless we know we can fund it. So that's why we're not near bankruptcy. That's why we're one of the more solvent cities in the state. So I'm very proud of my accomplishments in that. I'm proud of my record in being part of that. I'm a very fiscally conservative person, and I would be honored to be returned for another 4 years to continue my work.
Mr. Alexander.
Well, first of all, let's get probably one thing straight. Nobody is villainizing any employee or employee group in the city of Rancho Cucamonga. A council does have to take responsibility for the amount of money spent and the amount of benefits given. And I don't think you're going to have people exiting the community if there are adjustments made, and we need to get that out on the table right now. It was stated earlier that somebody didn't look into the issue carefully enough when purchasing a $1 million fire truck. You have no idea how much anguish that the council did go through in that purchase and still deemed it a necessity. Our employees are the best. Our employees are the very best. However, the ones at the lower level have suffered for years. While some haven't suffered, some have had a difficult time going to Victoria Gardens or any place else because they have no disposable income, and they do need to be helped. Quickly, I want to go ahead and read something that I read. I'm going to have to give the gentleman credit because I know it's illegal if I don't. His name was Stephen Hentz. He's a tax collector of Ventura County, California, and a former Superior Court judge. I'll go through it quickly. He told people, and I couldn't agree more, I'm committed to tell the truth always, to keep my promises, talk less, listen more, take all the blame and share all the credit, practice humility, patience, and optimism. Finally, he said, and I couldn't agree more, I believe in the United States would be a better place and its citizens better off if governments were smaller, less intrusive on our daily lives. We have become so accustomed to having the government tell us how to live that we are at risk of sublimating creativity, independence in exchange for a mess of government pottage. It isn't my idea of the American way, and I couldn't agree more.
Mr. Hanlon.
Tonight, you've heard from two groups. The incumbents, who are leading you down the current path, and the challengers, who believe that we can make a difference. I happen to be one of the challengers. If you believe for a moment that the challengers, what they had to say has merit, then act accordingly. If you because we're just like you. We're businessmen, we're family people, and we truly care about Rancho Cucamonga. Otherwise, we wouldn't be up here. We don't take any backing from unions, trash companies, nor special interest groups, nor do we trash the corners with political signs during this election period. If the incumbents are your cup of tea, then you'll go along with trashing our corners, you'll go along with eliminating the small guy, as they've done continually. You go along with stopping volunteers doing good work for our city. You have my word on one thing and one thing alone. I will represent the voter, not the good old boys club. Thank you.
Mr. Jimenez.
I get the last word. As the youngest person also. So I'll make it brief. How about that? You heard from all 6 of us now. You know where we're coming from. You know what we're bringing to the table. You know what our political philosophies are. Out of the youngest person on this table, my family, we have the most to gain from good decisions in the city council, but we also have the most to lose from bad decisions from the city council. I ask you guys to invest in the future of Rancho Cucamonga, and I humbly ask for your vote. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take a 10-minute recess. We are probably, well, almost assuredly going to go slightly past 9. I apologize for that, but as reflects their professionalism, all of our candidates have used almost every second awarded to them. Please, see you in a moment.